This is an audio course. Thank you for listening.
Sounds True presents Mindfulness for Beginners with the founder of the Stress Reduction Clinic at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center, Jon Kabat-Zinn.
Welcome to this program that's called Mindfulness for Beginners. I'm delighted to be working with you in this way, and I do so in the hope that whatever it was that drew you to the allure of mindfulness, that very impulse can be explored and nurtured so that it will grow and develop. Because no one comes to a program such as this by accident. There has to be some underlying impulse that longs for a certain knowing or way of being that may feel elusive, but is also sensed as highly desirable. Otherwise, you wouldn't even bother to pick up a program such as this. Also, each one of us brings our own genius to such adventures. And we always build on what's come before in our lives, even if much of it was and perhaps still is painful. Our entire past, whatever it's been, when it comes right down to it, becomes the very platform for doing the work of being in the present moment. And it becomes both the work and the adventure of a lifetime, not to be trapped in either our past or our ideas, but rather to reclaim the only moment that we ever really have. And that is always this one. And taking care of this one can have a remarkable effect on the next moment and so on the future. In this session, we'll be having a conversation of sorts, although with such a format, I'm going to be the one that winds up doing all the talking. But we will be exploring the whole subject of mindfulness together, as if you'd never heard about it and had no idea what it was, or what meditation is, and why it might be worth cultivating. We'll cover what it is, how to cultivate it in your life, what its various benefits might be in terms of stress and pain, health and illness. Of course, we can only touch on these topics in this format, and all my comments are only to enhance your motivation to make use of the other session, which guides you in the actual practicing of mindfulness, and to have some kind of framework for understanding why it makes sense to do something which seems as strange and alien as nothing, on a regular basis, on a systematic basis, in a disciplined way, to cultivate your own mind and what I would call your deep inner resources for learning, for growing, for healing, and potentially for transformation of your understanding of who you are and how to live in this world. If you want to go deeper, there are no end of resources. Mindfulness as a subject is an entire universe. It has many, many facets and galaxies. It's infinitely deep and wonderful. And there are fortunately many, many superb teachers, past and present, going all the way back to the Buddha himself and even before the Buddha, whose writings and whose books, and for the living ones, whose retreats can be invaluable to connect with over the course of this lifetime, your lifetime. Much of what I will be saying is mapped out in my various books, and in particular in Full Catastrophe Living and in Coming to Our Senses. So let's begin at the beginning. What is mindfulness? My working definition of mindfulness is that it's paying attention on purpose in the present moment as if your life depended on it, non-judgmentally. Actually, mindfulness is what comes out of paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally, and as if your life depended on it. and that is nothing else than awareness. Now, awareness is something that we're all intimately familiar with, and yet complete strangers to. So the training in mindfulness that we'll be exploring together is really the cultivation of a resource that's already yours. It doesn't require going anywhere. It doesn't require getting anything. But it does require, in some way, learning how to inhabit another domain of mind that we are, as a rule, fairly out of touch with, even though, of course, if we didn't have it, we'd already be dead. Mindfulness is often spoken of as the heart of Buddhist meditation. But really, mindfulness is universal because it's about attention and awareness, as I've just said, and attention and awareness are capacities that are shared by all of us. Nevertheless, it is fair to say that the most refined and developed articulations of mindfulness throughout history and how to cultivate it come from the Buddhist tradition. But I think by the same token, it's important to keep in mind that the Buddha himself was not a Buddhist, and even the term Buddhism wasn't established until the 18th century, and that term was coined by European religious scholars who had very little understanding of what the statues on the altars of temples were of some guy sitting cross-legged and what they were really about. What those statues and other Buddhist art objects are all about is actually the mind and states of mind. And the Buddha represents a state of mind that can simply be called, and he did speak about it in this way, awake. So the Buddha had some profound insights into the nature of the human mind that applied to any human mind, not just Buddhists or people practicing Buddhist meditation for that matter. Otherwise, really, it would be of no value. I like to think of the Buddha as a scientist, a genius of a scientist, really, who had no instruments at his disposal other than his own body and his own mind, and he used them to great advantage to explore the deep questions that he was interested in, like what is the nature of the mind and what is the nature of suffering. And of course, as with any instrument, whether it's a radio telescope or a spectrophotometer or a scale, you have to actually calibrate it first and stabilize the platform on which it sits so that you can get reliable readings. And part of the meditation practice that the Buddha came up with was to actually stabilize and calibrate the mind so that it could do the deep work of penetration. Obviously, if you were trying to look at the moon and you put your telescope on, say, a waterbed and then tried to, find the moon, every time you shifted your posture even the tiniest little bit, you'd lose the moon in the telescope. So it's the same with the mind. If the mind is going to investigate itself, first you have to learn at least the rudiments of stabilizing the mind enough so that it can actually do the work of paying attention and being aware of what's actually going on beneath the surface of our own mind's activities, which often are what thwart us or distract us or carry us away someplace else, as you'll soon see. So for all these reasons, mindfulness is really universal and doesn't have anything to do with Buddhism in the sense of you have to be a Buddhist in order to practice mindfulness, or for that matter, even that you have to practice meditation in order to cultivate mindfulness. But if you understand meditation in the deepest of ways, then you can't possibly not practice meditation when you're cultivating mindfulness, because they are no less than the same thing. It's this deep dimension of awareness that is ours already, but that we just are so unfamiliar with that we can't put it to use at the times in our lives that we need it the most. For close to 30 years now, my colleagues and I at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center's Stress Reduction Clinic have been using mindfulness within mainstream medicine as a profound resource for people facing stress, pain, and illness and disease who find that they don't receive full satisfaction from their healthcare and medical care, who, you could say, fall through the cracks of the healthcare system. And actually, a lot of people fall through the cracks of the healthcare system and don't get full satisfaction. So the idea of the stress reduction clinic is to challenge people to see if there's not something that they can do for themselves as a complement to whatever their doctors and surgeons and the healthcare system as a whole can do for them to move towards greater levels of health and well-being. And when I say health and well-being, I mean on the deepest and broadest of levels, so that ultimately it has to do not just with the health of the body or with getting people back to some kind of socially acceptable normal state, but what the true extent of being human actually is, and coming to know the mind intimately and to be able to use it in ways that actually cultivate the wisdom and deep qualities of compassion and goodness that lie within us. This work, which has spread to clinics and medical centers and hospitals around the world in the past 10 plus years, is known as mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR. Some of the methods we'll be practicing in the second session are the same as those we use with our patients in the hospital when they take the MBSR program in the stress reduction clinic. But again, that doesn't mean that they're just for people who are experiencing disease or chronic pain. These practices are universal and really are applicable for anybody who is alive. We do not have actually a great track record with the dead, but as long as you're breathing, from our perspective, there's more right with you than wrong with you, no matter what's wrong with you. And so the present moment becomes a really wonderful place to start on this, what I like to call adventure of a lifetime. So as I've been suggesting, when all is said and done, meditation is really about awareness, its qualities and stability, and its reliability. It's about bare attention, discernment, clear seeing, and thus wisdom, where wisdom means knowing the actuality of things rather than being caught in your own misperceptions, misapprehensions. And those, for all of us, are really legion, because it's so easy to be caught up in our own belief systems, ideas and opinions and prejudices that kind of form a veil or a cloud that prevent us from actually seeing what's right in front of our faces very often. And of course, many times we leave it to our family members to actually tell us those kinds of things, and then we don't believe it anyway. So, as I said, it's about bare attention, discernment, clear seeing, and wisdom. And at the same time, it's also about an affectionate quality in the attention, an openness, a kindness, an attention that is actually caring. And that is actually a manifestation, I would say, of our heart's intrinsic compassion. Not something, again, that we have to get, something that we might realize that we already, I won't even say have, that we already are. When I talk about clear seeing, that makes it sound like it's limited to one sense. But seeing in this case represents all the senses, since it's only through our senses that we can be aware of and therefore know anything at all. But from the meditative perspective, especially in Buddhism, but also in science, there's a deep realization that there are actually more than 5 senses. And Buddhism includes mind as a 6th sense. And by mind, they don't mean thinking. They don't mean just the thinking mind. They mean the mind that is closer to awareness itself, that capacity of mind that knows non-conceptually, that knows where you are right now. You don't have to think about where you are right now. Most of the time, you just know where you are, and you know what's come before, and you know what's going to happen. You have a sense of orientation in time. You have a sense of orientation in space. We don't think about it at all, but there's an awful lot that we take for granted that we actually know in very deep ways. And so that's what's being pointed to here when we talk about mind as a 6th sense. So clear seeing can also mean clear hearing, clear smelling, clear tasting, clear touching, and clear knowing, which would include knowing what's on your mind, and therefore thinking, and knowing your emotional state, and therefore feeling what you're feeling, whether it be, say, fear or anger, or sadness, frustration, irritation, impatience, annoyance, whatever. In a parallel unfolding, as I was suggesting, neuroscience also recognizes that there are more than simply the 5 most recognized senses, and that we have other really remarkable senses that are absolutely critical to our lives and well-being, one of which is called proprioception. Proprio just means self. Okay, that means the apprehension or perception of oneself. It's actually the sense of knowing and feeling the body's position in space, both statically and in motion. And that sense, although it's very, very rare, can be lost with a certain kind of neurological damage. And then your body just doesn't work, even though it's all the same. And I wrote up a case that Oliver Sacks talks about in one of his books, where the woman in question actually lost proprioception. It's a staggering revelation to how little we pay attention to that kind of a sense in our lives and in our bodies. And there's another sense of this kind too, which is called interoception, the sense of knowing how your body's feeling in general, the sense of the felt sense, so to speak, of what is actually unfolding. Again, it's not about thinking. It's an internal, embodied feeling that the neuroscientist Antonio Damasio writes about in his books. So that being said, actually there's a lot to be aware of when it comes to our living experience, both outwardly in what you could call the world and inwardly in what you might call the interior world of our being. Since awareness, amazingly enough, can hold it all, both the inner landscapes and the outer landscapes of our experience, there's no fundamental separation between inner and outer, the knower and what's being known. You could say the subject and the object, or even no separation between being and doing. There only seems to be, and there really does seem to be, but that seeming is such a powerful aspect of our experience, especially when we're not paying attention to it in the present moment in a non-reactive, non-judgmental way through mindfulness, that it obscures the underlying unity, which is that there is mysteriously just the seeing, just the hearing, the smelling, the tasting, the touching, the feeling, the knowing, or you could say just awarenessing. Think about that for a moment. Just seeing, the miracle of that. Just hearing, and really hearing, and knowing that you're hearing. That is awareness. Or I like to actually coin the present participle of it, awarenessing. Not allowed to say that in English, so I like to say it, awarenessing. And maybe that'll give you a certain tonal or textual feeling for the spirit of mindfulness. It's no longer a noun, it's a verb. And it has a whole dynamics to it by being a verb that is very, very important to this whole domain of looking into who we are as human beings and being able to function in a very, very stressful and sometimes you could say even highly disordered, chaotic, diseased, and sometimes, frankly, insane world. The irony of all this, especially when people come to the medical center with something wrong with them, is that we are already whole, even when we have some kind of disease or some kind of problem. And that's why we say to people that, from our perspective, no matter what's wrong with you, there's still more right with you than wrong with you, as long as you're breathing. So if we're actually already more whole, we're also in the habit of fragmenting the world into inner and outer, this and that, what we like and what we dislike, what we want and what we don't want, and making those kinds of separations, even though they're artificial and even delusional in a profound way, making them still has a profound grip on our habits of thought, emotion, and sensing and knowing. And it's those habits that keep us stuck and prevent us from apprehending the spaciousness, the clarity, the unity of awareness itself, even though really you could say it's right beneath our noses in every moment and always available to us, since awareness is ours by birth and by virtue of being human. I think it's important at this juncture to simply say that although I'm doing the talking, there are really no experts when it comes to mindfulness. And so it becomes something that we all actually are embedded in together, if you will. That is the adventure of life and how willing we are to be present in our own lives. So people, sometimes say, well, okay, I get it. Mindfulness. Now, everybody's talking about mindfulness nowadays. Mindfulness this, mindfulness that. I get it. The idea is I'm supposed to be more present and less judgmental. Okay. Hey, thanks a lot. Why didn't I think about that? Clear sailing from here on, no problem. I'll just be more mindful. I'll be less judgmental. I'll be more in the present moment. Well, all I can say is lots of luck. Turns out it doesn't quite work that way. Mindfulness is not merely a good idea or even a great philosophy, even a great Asian Eastern philosophy. It is actually a way of being and a way of living. So until you implement it, it's not actually yours. It's just one more thought, one more name, one more slogan. And the real challenge here, as we will see together when we move into the actual practice, is that the practice gives us instant access to other dimensions of our life that, as I was suggesting before, have been here all along, but we've just been clueless. We've just been out of touch. And we use that sensory metaphor to actually acknowledge how easy it is to see without seeing, hear without hearing, eat without tasting anything, and zone along on autopilot most of our lives, meanwhile thinking, oh yeah, we know what's happening, we know who we are, we know where we're going. And the interesting thing really happens when you start to question who you are and where you're going. How much do we actually know with certainty who we are? Or are we just creating some gigantic story for ourselves? And then when the story seems to be going well, we're just tremendously happy and, full bore ahead into what's next. And when the story sort of takes a corner, turns a corner, or for one reason or another, maybe even from early childhood, is a story of mayhem and disaster and abuse or neglect or not being seen, then the story that we tell ourselves is one of being completely imprisoned or completely unworthy or completely unintelligent or whatever it is that we tell ourselves to create this story that there's no hope for us. And what mindfulness is saying is this is just all thinking. It's highly supported by, all sorts of evidence that you can marshal from your past, why you're no good or why you're the greatest thing to, hit the planet since sliced rye bread or whatever it is. But all of those are just like, obsessions around kind of self-centeredness that when you begin to question it or look at who is doing all this talking inside my own head, you realize that you don't even know. And if you want to actually taste wholeness, which is the root meaning of the word healthy, the word healing, and the word holy, Holy, the irony is that it's here in all moments, this rotation in consciousness that allows us to actually see and realize that we're seeing, to think and to know what's on our minds, to feel, to experience emotion, and to be in relationship to it in a way that is actually wise and is actually self-compassionate and doesn't saddle ourselves with stories of how great we are or stories of how horrible we are or inadequate we are, that then kind of serve like cement blocks that keep us kind of sinking in some ocean or some morass of our own, to a very large extent, our own creation. So from that point of view, it's not like meditation is saying you should know who you are. It's much more, can you question who you are and be comfortable with not knowing? Because when it comes right down to it, people say, well, who are you? And you say, well, I'm John, Kabat-Zinn. Well, that was just a name that my parents gave me when I was born. John. They could have given me another name. Would I be the same person or not? Shakespeare had a lot to say about that. Would a rose by any other name smell as sweet? And the same for your age, your accomplishments, everything else. It doesn't add up to the person. The person is something else, something more mysterious, something, that is bigger. Walt Whitman said, I am large, I contain multitudes. It's actually true. We're like universes in ourselves. We're huge, but we tend to contract and think of ourselves in small, contracted ways. And the power of mindfulness is the power of unlocking those views, those perspectives that in some sense keep us thinking we know who we are and not paying attention to the actuality of who we are, and also the beauty of being alive and the possibilities of a life that is lived mindfully. Not knowing, by the way, is not such a bad thing. It's basically just being honest. Of course, we're scared to even say in class, when we're in school, that we don't know something because we're afraid to look stupid. But actually, all great scientists have to admit what they don't know, because otherwise they're never going to discover anything meaningful, because the new discovery happens at the interface between what is known and what's not known. And if you're completely preoccupied with what is already known, you can't make the leap into that other dimension that's often called creativity or imagination or poetry or whatever it is that allows us to see a hidden order in things that until it's seen, it ain't seen. And it therefore is hidden. And then when someone else sees it and you say, oh my God, why didn't I see that? Well, that's because in some sense, everybody has their own karma, so you can't see necessarily what somebody else is to be seen, but maybe you can see what's yours to be seen. And that may be a lifetime's work to discover, what is my trajectory? What is my job on the planet with a capital J? What is my heart yearning for? What is my body really asking of me in this moment? And then feeding those dimensions as if that was really the only work worth doing on the planet. And you could make the argument that that's true. When we speak about the word mindfulness, by the way, I want to make it very clear that in all Asian languages, the word for mind and the word for heart are the same word. In all Asian languages. So when you hear the word mindfulness, you have to equally well, to really understand what mindfulness is about, hear the word heartfulness. And that's why we often speak about affectionate attention or being gentle and compassionate with yourself, because this is not some kind of cold, hard, discerning, witnessing, peeling back, to find something. That's kind of, you can feel the forcing, doing elements of this. Meditation is really not about doing, it's about being, as in human being. And then the interesting thing is then people say, well, yeah, but then I'll never get anything done. I got all this stuff to do. How am I ever going to meditate? I mean, it's just, but the fact of the matter is that it's not that meditation's about like navel gazing and never functioning in the world or doing anything of real value. It's letting the doing come out of the being. And then that's some other doing. because it's really informed by these other dimensions of being that come out of knowing the mind, that come out of coming to our senses, that come out of being able to see beneath the surface of appearances, or hear what's really being said by a patient or by your child, or by a look that flashes across somebody's face when you've said something gauche but you don't really realize it, and an arrow's gone into the other person's heart and you're clueless about it. Mindfulness can actually hold all of this in such a way that, one, you might not shoot that arrow in the first place after a while, but if you do, you'll see the effect of it. And you'll have enough integrity and what some people call character, so to speak, to actually apologize and say, whoops, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. That was like another moment of mindlessness. And by the way, when you practice mindfulness a lot, the first thing you notice is how mindless we are so much of the time. And that's where the non-judgmental piece comes in. Because if you're going to hammer yourself every time you move out of the present moment, well, you're going to be hammering yourself a lot. And maybe it's time to sort of put down the hammer, stop beating on ourselves, to sort of castigate ourselves for not living up to some kind of ideal. And in some way, how about just being honest? How about when we blow it, okay, I just blew that, but we're aware of blowing it, and the next moment we have a lot of different options of how to handle that. That's what meditation is about. It's not about, if I meditate, then I'll be one way, I'll always be compassionate, I'll be like the Dalai Lama, I'll be like Mother Teresa, I'll be like whoever your spiritual guru hero is of the moment. You don't have a snowball's chance in hell of being like the Dalai Lama, or Mother Teresa, or any other hero, Gandhi, whatever. The only person that you have the possibility of being like is yourself. And that's really the challenge of mindfulness, is to be yourself. And of course, the irony is you already are. But what does that mean? And how can we embody that knowing and be that knowing, moment by moment by moment by moment by moment? As the proverbial stuff hits the proverbial fan, as we go through mind states from boredom to impatience to irritability to grandeur to whatever it is that what about a little bit of joy in the process and be aware of that? What about a little bit of compassion for other people or loving kindness? What about a little bit of loving kindness towards ourselves? And what about noticing that the noticing itself can hold all of it and isn't really in pain when we say, I'm suffering so much. The awareness of the suffering that allows us to say, I'm suffering so much, ask yourself sometime. Just look deeply, not through thought. Is my awareness of my suffering? Is my awareness of my fear and trepidation and worry and anxiety, is it frightened? Is my awareness of pain in pain? Is my awareness of my sadness or depression or lack of, feeling of being worthy, is that awareness unworthy? Moment by moment, we have opportunities to step out of that storyline of thinking and getting hijacked by our emotions and our ideas and opinions, our likes and dislikes, and be with the actuality, to rest in the awareness that is already your partner, your ally, your birthright. And meditation is cultivating it. It's cultivating it. It's like planting seeds and then watering the seeds and then protecting them. Yes, you do have to protect them because they'll get trampled by the cows, before they're really big, or peed on by the dogs, or whatever it is. You need to take care of your meditation practice, especially as a beginner in the early stages, because it is precious and it can be easily trampled down, or it can be easily sort of slighted by other people if you start telling them, I'm really into meditation. Now I've started meditating. Yeah, it's going. How's it going? Well, it's going really well. You start talking the good talk about meditation, and after 2 or 3 weeks, you ain't going to be meditating anymore. You waste all your energy yakking how great meditation is. Pretty soon you don't have any time to meditate. You're too much into the PR of it all. So we tell our patients in the stress reduction clinic, listen, for the first 5 or 10 years, don't tell anybody you're meditating. Just every time you get the impulse to tell somebody you're meditating, go and get your butt on a cushion and meditate some more. And of course, it doesn't have to be on a cushion. Fine meditating on a chair, lying on the floor, and we'll be doing that in other programs. I think it's also important to say that there's an ethical foundation to the cultivation of mindfulness, and this is non-trivial. Mindfulness is really related to generosity, to compassion, to openness. You can't practice without feelings of some degree of generosity, openness, and compassion. And the foundation of all of it is a kind of orientation of non-harming. You want to really be real with yourself and not just pound on yourself or hammer on yourself some more every time you don't live up to your own self-created, usually unrealistic standards, and then beat yourself up over every falling down that you experience. It's the foundation is a spirit of non-harming. And by the way, that's not so loosey-goosey or so airy-fairy or so, New Age spiritual or anything like that. It's the core of the Hippocratic Oath in medicine. First, do no harm. So if you cultivate that kind of attitude towards yourself, then when you put your butt down on the chair or the cushion, you'll know why you're here. It won't be, now I'm going to do some big exercise and follow the instructions and hope I get to some great place. There's no great place to get to. You're already in the greatest place you're ever going to be, and that's this moment. And if you miss it, well, it's a moment of your life. Don't worry, because you got this moment now. The other one's already gone. So how long is it going to take for us to actually wake up to the fact that we have nothing but moments to live? Now, why am I emphasizing an ethical foundation to meditation at all? Well, it's really, as I've been suggesting, because the mind can wind up embroiled in very unhealthy states of mind and easily in some way get caught up in what might be most appropriately described as delusion, although we wouldn't see it that way. And when we are driven by a kind of preoccupation with ourselves, in the smallest sense of the word, those personal pronouns I, me, and mine, my life, my ambition, my career, my needs, I, me, mine, a kind of creation or generation of the self-centered orientation towards life. It can actually cause huge amounts of harm to yourself and, of course, to others when your needs are in conflict with other people's needs. And just think about nations that get into that kind of thing, or politicians, or on any level that you want to look at it. When you fall into a certain kind of smallness in the way you identify yourself, then the danger is that you can do a huge amount of harm. So when we say that one of the core motivations here and the core foundation of meditation practice and mindfulness practice is non-harming, that allows us to actually take an entirely different perspective on how we're going to live our lives and even what our deep needs may be. Our deep needs may be very, very different from what we think our deep needs are, or our desperate longings, or our strong feelings that I've got to have this. My life just will not be complete unless this happens or unless that doesn't happen. So we can become prisoners of our own likes and dislikes, our own ideas and opinions, our own impulses and perceptions. And nobody's kind of minding the store to ask the deep questions of, is this even really true? Or am I falling into misperception, misapprehension, misunderstanding, and therefore mistaking reality and creating, mistakes all over the place? The Buddhists have a way of talking about this which is very down to earth. They call these mind states, they group them under 3 categories that they consider to be poisons. So the first one is greed. They just call it greed. Anything you want. Greed. That's a little bit on the strong side. But, when you come right down to it, it's not so bad. Yeah. I mean, we're grasping at things all the time that we feel incomplete. And if we just get this, then we'll feel complete until we feel incomplete again. And then we grasp a little bit more until we, get the next thing. And that's a never-ending treadmill. We all recognize it, but we all sort of see it better in other people than we do in ourselves. Then what about the flip side of that? Hatred. They're just very straightforward about just hatred. Anything you don't want, you don't like, you want to run away from, you want to criticize, you have some negative perspective on, they just lump it under one category, hatred. And that would include anger, it would include, rage, fear. And then there's the third one, delusion, as we've been talking about, or illusion, which is like the exact opposite of wisdom, not seeing the real connections between things, not knowing what's actually going on, but living in your own little storyline and what's going on. And then it becomes, very often, we've all experienced this, a self-fulfilling prophecy so that you can marshal, any evidence you want for whatever it is that your story is and make it true. Only, that's delusion. So between greed, hatred, and delusion, there's a lot to pay attention to. There's a lot to be aware of right here, close to home. You don't have to be criticizing anybody else, and you don't have to criticize yourself. The whole point of mindfulness is to just see this play of mind and body, and then begin to realize that the you that's seeing it has infinite potential, and you have no idea who this you is. We call it awareness. Pure and simple is awareness. And then we just ignore it, disregard it, devalue it. And that is a huge tragedy. So there's actually a lot to be aware of, and that's why mindfulness packs so much power, so much transformative power, so much healing power, so much capacity for orienting us and helping us to grow into ourselves across the entire lifespan, no matter what your age is when you come to this program or when you first hear the word mindfulness and decide, I don't know why, but I feel some strong attraction to paying attention in the present moment non-judgmentally, to the promise of this, because basically it's the promise of getting your life back, of giving your life back to yourself. And many of our patients say that to us with great regularity. And we just smile and say, well, it's actually not really true that we gave, because they'll say, you gave my life back to me. And I say, well, I didn't give your life back to you. This practice, your willingness to engage in mindfulness and sustain it as a discipline over time, not just keep it as a nice little idea that you sort of pull out every time the proverbial stuff does hit the proverbial fan, every time you feel stressed. It's not a dime store relaxation technique, mindfulness. It's not a technique at all. It's a way of being. It's a way of being. So meditation, although there are many meditation techniques, meditation doesn't have to do with the techniques. The techniques are just skillful means for waking up to the actuality of what's already here. Just as there is an ethical foundation to mindfulness practice, I think it's important that we realize from the very, very beginning that there's also an attitudinal foundation, and I have been alluding to it when I've been talking about a kind of affectionate attention or being gentle and non-judgmental with ourselves. So actually, at one point, I mapped out this attitudinal foundation in my first book, Full Catastrophe Living. And I name, although there are many more than 7, I name 7 attitudinal factors that are really foundational in mindfulness practice. And they are 1, non-judging. We've talked some about that already, but we've got ideas and opinions about everything. I mean, just start paying attention to what's on your mind, and basically everything is a judgment of one kind or another. Like this, don't like that, as we've been talking about. I won't say any more about that. The second attitudinal foundation of mindfulness is patience. We're always trying to get someplace else, on the way to some better moment, some better time when it all will come together for me. And so often we just get incredibly driven and impatient. And the classical example in childhood is, the kid who wants to make the butterfly come out of the chrysalis sooner because wouldn't it be nice to have the butterfly? So, just sort of peels apart the chrysalis, but doesn't have any understanding that things unfold in their own time. And so patience is really a wonderful attitude to bring to the practice, because the practice is really about stepping out of time altogether. When we're talking about the present moment, when we're talking about now, we're talking about outside of clock time. And we've all had moments like that. In fact, we have nothing but moments like that, but we ignore almost all of them. And it's just every once in a while, once in a blue moon, that we will kind of have a moment where time stops for us in ecstasy or in tragedy. But actually, we can learn how to step out of time through mindfulness. That gives us a lot more time, actually, because when you're mindful and you catch your moments, well, we have an infinite number of them between now and the time we're going to die. The more you miss, the faster the trip. The third foundation of mindfulness practice is what's called beginner's mind. And since this is a program for beginners, I think it's very fitting to stop for a moment and just talk about beginner's mind. It's from the Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki Roshi's little book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, where he says, in the mind of the expert, there are very few possibilities. In the mind of the beginner, there are an infinite number of possibilities. What we need is to actually maintain beginner's mind over and over and over again, moment by moment, because our ideas and opinions and our expertise often gets in the way of knowing what we don't know. And as we said, resting in an awareness of not knowing is incredibly important for seeing with any clarity, with any creativity, and for living our truth in ways that have integrity. So beginner's mind, in this program, you still have it. By the time you're finished with this program, whoops, you'll have lost it, because you'll think you know something about meditation from all of my yakking. But the fact of the matter is that much better, as I said earlier, to realize how little anybody really knows about the meditation. And if you meet senior monks, high lamas, people of that ilk in the Tibetan tradition or other traditions, they will almost invariably tell you, they'll start their talks with, I know nothing. Tremendous level of humility and modesty. I know nothing. You should really be studying with somebody else. High lamas with decades and decades of meditation training and practice and teaching say, I don't really know anything. And they're not joking. It's not a false modesty. Beginner's mind. And, if you think about children for a moment and their beauty, or even kittens and how cute they are, some of it comes out of that freshness, taking every moment fresh. You've never seen this moment before. Well, I got news for you. You've never seen this moment before, or this one, or this one, or this one. If you take this, well, I've seen one moment, you've seen them all attitude, you're going to get very, very bored cultivating mindfulness. And then that doesn't have to be the end of the journey. Then you can just be aware of how bored you are. And that awareness, you can ask yourself, is my awareness of my terminal boredom bored? The answer will be not at all. Your awareness isn't caught by your boredom. And in fact, boredom can become unbelievably interesting. And in fact, as soon as you watch it, you may find that it dissolves on you into something much more interesting, another mind state. That's true for virtually every mind state, including the ones that we feel completely tyrannized by, or are so terrified of we don't even acknowledge to ourselves that we have them. Who, me? Frightened? Scared? Tense? No, not me. Not me. Not me. Can you hear the story of not me? That's the story of me. This brings us to the fourth attitudinal foundation of mindfulness, which would be trust. Again, this is not some dime store, goody two-shoes kind of notion here. But what about trust? What is worthy of trust? Can we trust what we know? Well, can you trust what you know through thinking? Usually not. Usually not. As I said, you can misperceive, misapprehend, mistake what's actually going on. But what about trusting awareness? What about trusting your heart? What about trusting your motivation to at least do no harm? What about trusting your experience until it's proven to be inaccurate? What about paying attention to, say, seeing and really seeing for the first time? Can you trust your senses? Well, every single sense can be tricked. Every single sense. So it may not be an absolute trust in the senses, but a relative trust as we train ourselves to be in touch with the senses. Yeah, you might be. Can you trust your body? What if your body has had cancer in the past or has cancer now? Do you feel like, oh, my body betrayed me? Or is there a sort of larger sense of trust that, there's something going on in the body, but again, there may be much more right with it than wrong with it. And maybe your attitudinal orientation can mobilize some of what's right with it to actually hold the cancer in a way that would further healing, deepen the capacity to live life fully while you have it to live, and not get into sort of magical thinking that, oh, now that I'm meditating, we'll just meditate the cancer away. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Don't know. That don't know you can trust. The fifth attitudinal foundation this is a real kicker for Americans, non-striving. Non-striving. What are you talking about? We are go-getters, can-do. That sounds really un-American. Non-striving. We're doers. We should retitle the species human doings, because we are really into doing and progress and getting somewhere. So non-striving. It's related to like dropping in on the present moment and the timeless quality of the present moment. There's no place to go, nothing to do, nothing to attain. So meditation's not like anything else you've ever taken on, like learning how to drive a car or whatever it is. And when you learn it, then it becomes automatic and then it becomes a habit. And then it's just a skill that you use and you never think about it. And of course, that's why there are like 50,000 fatal accidents in the United States every year, because everybody's off in their head someplace else. Hardly anybody's in the car driving around. They're not paying attention. They're on the cell phone or whatever. Or the mind is on the cell phone even if you don't have a cell phone. So non-striving is not trivial. It's realizing that you are already here. There's no place to go because the agenda is to be awake. It's not some ideal that after 40 years of sitting on top of Mount Everest or in a cave in the Himalayas or studying with 1 million Tibetan teachers or doing 10,000 prostrations or whatever it is, that you'll be any better than you are now. It's impossible. You'll just be older. What happens now is what matters. If you don't pay attention now, the poet Kabir said, the great Sufi Hindu poet of the 16th century, if you don't pay attention now, you'll only wind up with an apartment in the city of death later. T.S. Eliot said, ridiculous, in 4 quartets, by the way, his last and greatest poem. He said, ridiculous the waste sad time stretching before and after. Non-striving. Even the tiniest little bit of letting ourselves off the hook and just realizing, hey, we're already here. The future that we want, this is it. This is the future of all the previous thoughts you've ever had about the future. You're in it. You're already in it. What is the purpose of all this living if it's only to get someplace else? And then when you're there, you're not happy anyway. You want to be someplace else. It's always for when I retire, when I graduate from college, when I make enough money, when I get married, when I get divorced, when the kids move out. It's like, wait a minute, this is it. This is your life. We only have moments. This moment's as good as any other. It's perfect. It's perfect. Non-striving. Doesn't mean you don't get a lot done. I know a lot of meditators get a lot done. The doing comes out of the being to some degree. That's an art form. Are any of us good at it? No. But at least intending to live that way has a chance of greater balance, greater emotional balance, greater cognitive balance, greater clarity of mind and heart, and a lot less toxic for other people who live with you or around you. Which brings us to the sixth foundation of mindfulness, which is acceptance. This one's really misunderstood by people all the time. Just accept it. Just accept it. No one's saying just accept it. Acceptance is like only the hardest thing in the world. Accepting what? Accepting that things are the way things are. It's not saying you should be passively resigned to how things are. If things are going to hell in handbasket, then that knowing, that awarenessing of things going to hell in handbasket can give you a place to stand to act in the next moment. But if you don't accept the way things actually are, you won't know how things actually are. So acceptance is a whole universe in and of itself, to actually be with things as they are. If you have a chronic back condition and you're continually fighting, oh, my life is over, and you're just thinking about when I didn't have my chronic back condition, this ruined my life, then you're creating the story of how this ruined my life and I become my chronic back condition, and it goes on and on and on and on. And if you just hold the whole of it in awareness, then that story is no longer the story of you. You have a much bigger story now. The story of how aware I am of how much I'm beating myself over the head with the hammer, of the story of my back and my pain and my cancer and my this and my that, all of which totally true. It's just not complete in its truth. It's only partially true. And so if we can accept how things are now, the very next moment's already different. It's liberated from all of the that we saddle ourselves with in terms of what the Buddhists call clinging to ideas and opinions, that we've got to have this in order for this moment to be a happy moment. And when we let go of that and let things be as they are, whether they're good, bad, or ugly, the full catastrophe, as Zorba, the Greek, called it, then all of a sudden it becomes possible to stand in this moment without it having to be any different. And that's freedom. That's liberation. Comes from acceptance, but it's not mere acceptance. It's not passive resignation. It's not be turning into a doormat yourself and letting the world or life or other people trample all over you. It's actually seizing hold of the actuality of things. And then the next moment, if you have to act, but you'll act out of mindfulness, out of heartfulness, out of some kind of emotional intelligence, instead of hijacked by whatever your feelings are about what you can't accept. Now, it takes a long time to come to acceptance. Sometimes you have to go through denial first. Sometimes you have to go through anger. Sometimes you have to go through grieving. And these are the stages, of loss. But ultimately, the challenge is, can I accept how things actually are? Moment by moment, by moment, by moment, by moment. Well, first you have to see, feel, taste, touch, smell how things actually are. No. It's a practice. It's not an ideal. It's not some special state you get to. Oh, I used to be mindless. Now I'm mindful. No, it's like moment by moment by moment. You're losing mindfulness and then recovering. Just like walking is moment by moment, actually losing your balance and recovering it. That's what walking is. It's a controlled falling. Same with mindfulness. You're falling into yourself. You're falling into clarity. You're falling into kindness. And the last, speaking of falling, would be letting go, or non-attachment. Non-attachment to what we want, what we're clinging to, what we have to have, what we most hate, what we have huge aversion for. Just not being attached to it. Why? Because yourself is now so big and so spacious, so much more like awareness than like thinking or like ego. Even though thinking and ego can be, happy right inside of awareness, the awareness holds them in such a way that they don't take us down anymore. And so we let go, which means let be. It's also a practice. Nothing harder than non-attachment. It's the hardest work in the world. By the way, I should have said this at the beginning, I suppose, but it's good enough to say it now. By the way, folks, this whole adventure of mindfulness is only the hardest work in the world. This is no joke. This is not some dime store relaxation thing or some kind of woo-woo healing. This is the challenge of a lifetime to grow into who you actually are. And it's each of our work, and no one's work is the same. Because we're not the same. We are the same, but we're also not the same. So we have to find out who we are and not do someone else's work. Now, when it comes to thinking, speaking of thinking, which is so dominating in our lives, and as soon as you sit down to meditate or lie down to meditate, the first thing you'll notice, the mind has a life of its own. It's just going to go and go and go. And it's going to have ideas and opinions now about mindfulness, now about meditation, about how well you're doing or not doing, or how boring it is and how awareness of boredom doesn't do what John said it would do. It's just more boredom. Well, think about it for a moment. Isn't it true that ever since we were in school, we've been trained in critical thinking? I mean, I remember very clearly myself asking my teachers when I was something I didn't want to learn, like, say, trigonometry or grammar. I'd say, well, why do we have to learn this? And I was told always that it would help me to develop the capacity to think critically and to speak more clearly and more thoughtfully. And you know what? It turns out that's true. And I actually love grammar, and I love the English language, and I love writing, and while, I don't use trigonometry very much, I love the whole notion of the trigonometry of the universe, so to speak, and the geometry of the universe, and the fact that the geometry of the universe is not Euclidean, and that Einstein actually, proposed, and it seems to be the case, that the universe is warped by gravity. And so it's like, time and space are actually warped by mass. And this is really interesting stuff. So, you do need a foundation in critical thinking in order to be able to understand the world even a tiny bit. So it's extremely valuable, thinking. Of course, thinking is unbelievably valuable, and it's very important as a beginner in meditation. You understand meditation is not about shutting off your thinking. It's not about shutting down your thinking. It's not saying it would be better if you didn't think and that we're trying to just suppress all thought and have the mind be silent. If you try to suppress your thinking, you're going to wind up with a gigantic headache. It's like trying to stop the ocean from waving. It's in the nature of the surface of the mind to wave, secrete these little thoughts, these bubbles coming off the bottom of a pot of water. There are many different images to describe them. But if we get caught in them, and if we self-identify with them, that's me, or that's not me, then we're really caught. That's what's called clinging. The Buddha put it this way. He said all his teachings could be condensed into one sentence. Since he taught nonstop, without taking any time off for sabbaticals, vacations, or even weekends, he taught nonstop for 45 years. And not just 9 to 5. And he said, all of my teachings can be encapsulated in one sentence. I like to say, hey, if that's true, maybe we should memorize the sentence, even if we don't understand it. Imagine you get 45 years of teaching in one sentence. And the sentence is, nothing is to be clung to as I, me, or mine. I won't even bother to say any more about it. But you have to understand what he means by the verb clinging. It doesn't mean there's no you. You have to get somebody, hire somebody, some servant to put on your pants in the morning because there's no you, and you don't have any money in your bank account because it's not yours and there's no bank. And no. What it means is the clinging is what's in that, is self-identification, the self-centeredness that distorts, that creates illusions that function as prisons for us. So isn't it true that we've gotten so good at thinking that we don't recognize thoughts as thoughts anymore? Isn't it true that we tend to experience our ideas, our opinions, our thoughts as facts, as the absolute reality of things, even when we know, and this is very true, I think you'll recognize it, that someplace deep down that's not the case? Of course we do, but we don't know what to do with that uncomfortable feeling lurking in the shadows of our awareness, in part because it's a bit scary, or more than a bit scary. But what we haven't had since early childhood or at any time during our education, in general, at least that's certainly true for me, is any kind of advice or systematic training in the value of awareness as something other than and bigger than thought and emotion. Something that can hold both thoughts and emotion, and which is already not caught by them or caught up in them, as we've been seeing. Awareness, as I've already said, is our birthright as much as our amazing capacities for thinking and feeling, or for that matter, of our eyes for seeing. But when did you ever take a course or even one class in the cultivation of awareness, along with all your training in critical thinking? It's doubtful that you ever have. Amazingly, it's not part of the curriculum in elementary school, which it should be, or middle school or high school, or for that matter, what we call higher education. Although now that's changing rapidly in some circles across the entire educational and age spectrum. It's not that there's anything wrong with thinking. It's one of humanity's most amazing gifts. But when not examined in the larger field of awareness, thinking can run amok. It can also wind up, along with the unexamined tumult of afflictive emotional states, imprisoning us and causing great suffering to ourselves and to others and to the world too. As Aristotle put it somewhat harshly, the unexamined life is not worth living. Since mindfulness is about the cultivation of moment-to-moment awareness through careful and systematic and disciplined paying attention, it can seem at first, especially at the beginning, as if what's most important is what we're paying attention to. That is, the objects of attention. Whether it's what we're seeing or what we're hearing or what we're smelling or tasting or touching or feeling or knowing. In other words, what we're experiencing. That's in part because from the beginning, we do have to focus on something to pay attention to. Whether it's the feeling of the breath moving in and out of our body, or the world of sounds coming to our ears, or anything else we can perceive or apprehend in the present moment. But it's important to know, especially from the beginning, especially if you really are a beginner, it's important to know this from the very beginning, that it's not the breath or the sounds or even our thoughts when we're paying attention to thoughts as if they were weather patterns in the mind, clouds rising and passing away. It's not that that's most important. What's most important and most easily missed or taken for granted is the awareness that feels and knows without thinking that breathing is going on in this moment, that hearing is going on in this moment, that thoughts are moving through the sky of the mind in this moment. It's the awareness that's important in all of this, no matter what the objects are we're paying attention to. And that awareness is already ours. It's already available, already complete, already capable of holding and knowing non-conceptually anything and everything in your experience, inwardly and outwardly, no matter how big, no matter how trivial or how momentous, because that is simply the property of awareness itself, and you already have it. Or perhaps it would be more accurate to say, you already are it. So in this program that we call Mindfulness for Beginners, as we move to the next session that's going to cultivate mindfulness moment by moment by moment, the non-judgmental attending to the unfolding of whatever it is that we're paying attention to, as best you can, keeping in mind that it's the awareness that is what's important. And it's the awareness that moves across all the different kinds of techniques. They're all different doors into the very same room. And as we learn how to stabilize our paying attention and how to feel objects become more vivid, to see them with greater clarity, to drop beneath the surface of appearances, we're actually learning how to inhabit and how to rest in this quality of awareness that's already ours, and that can walk with us moment by moment through life as it unfolds, through thick and thin, and learn how to actually rely on that awareness, on the power of mindfulness, to stand in our life as if it really mattered. And it does. More than you think, more than you could possibly think.
Sounds True presents Mindfulness for Beginners, Session 2 with Jon Kabat-Zinn.
Since we've seen that cultivation of mindfulness has to do with paying attention to things that we ordinarily don't pay attention to, we're going to start this series of formal practices with an actual eating meditation. So for this practice, seeing if you can arrange to have a couple of raisins on hand. And we're going to just take one of them and bring it up towards the face for closer inspection. And just drinking it in through your eyes, as if you'd never seen one of these things before, and maybe even forgetting that it's called a raisin, and seeing it in its fullness. You've certainly never seen this particular one before. So noticing its surface features, color, shape. As you turn it in your hands, just sort of seeing whether there are any unique features to it. As I'm doing it, I notice a kind of little circular scarring at one end, which, of course, you'll know is the equivalent of our belly button. Sort of evidence that this shriveled up little something was once connected to a much larger whole. But just drinking it in through the eyes. And then maybe closing your eyes when you feel like it and feeling it through your fingers. Really getting in touch with this object. Noticing the ridges and the valleys, and maybe even putting it in the palm of your hand and feeling the heft of it. It has a certain weight to it. And maybe even bringing it up to the nose at a certain point, and again drinking in the fragrance, anything at all in the domain of smell coming off of this object. And again, perhaps with the eyes closed, if it helps you to be more in touch with your experience from moment to moment. Just sensing what's here to be smelled, allowing the in-breath to bring in with it the aroma, the fragrance, if there is any, off of this object. And when you're ready, allowing your eyes to open and continuing to hold it in your fingers and feeling it and seeing it, and be aware of the quality of the attention that you're bringing to this hugely familiar object. And staying as best you can present with the seeing, with the touching, as best you can from moment to moment. When you're ready, you can, if you want to, you could even bring it up to one of your ears and see if you can hear anything coming from it as you turn it around real close to the ear. So it's not out of the question that we don't often listen to our food, but it's not out of the question that you could use the hearing sense, and some foods actually do fizzle or flame or make crackling noises, and you may find that this little object will surprise you if you turn it around your ears. But then bringing it back to where you can see it. And then gradually bringing it up towards the lips. And noticing as you do that, that the arm and the hand really know how to do this, to position it right in the center of your mouth. When you were 6 months old, your body didn't quite do it this way. And whatever you were eating wound up all over your face, all over the floor, all over your body. But just honoring how well the gross motor functioning of the arm and hand can bring this object right up to your lips, and As you do that, before you touch it to the lips or let it come inside, noticing if anything's going on in your mouth. As I do it, I'm finding that there's a strong secreting of saliva in my mouth. And it's clear that there's a certain kind of anticipation that feeding is going to start happening fairly soon. But noticing that this object hasn't come into the mouth yet. So it's all around anticipation. The mind is anticipating eating, and the body is actually secreting, and not only secreting, but actually synthesizing and generating enzymes and fluid to prepare the mouth for this initial step in the process of digestion. It's a real mind-body phenomenon. And you probably have the same thing happen if you didn't even have the raisin in your hand. And you can certainly feel that for yourself if you were to imagine biting down at this moment on a nice, juicy, fresh-cut wedge of lemon. Mind-body phenomenon. So now with great sensitivity, slowly bringing the raisin to the lips and noticing how it comes into the mouth. Noticing how this whole thing works. Feeling what goes on to bring this object into the mouth. And then noticing how it gets positioned between the teeth, the role of the tongue in receiving it, in positioning it. Just holding all of this in awareness, moment by moment by moment, without biting down yet. Just feeling the intelligence in the tongue, in the cheeks, in the teeth, and in the mind that is so well suited for this activity we call eating. And we do so many times a day with very, very little awareness. And then slowly, when the raisin is positioned where the mouth wants it to be positioned, slowly start biting down on it and taking maybe 3, 4, or 5 very deliberate, intentional, mindful chews while you remain open to whatever's going on in the mouth in any of the sensory domains, including hearing, including tasting, including feeling the texture. And then slowly continuing to chew and experiencing chewing and tasting moment by moment by moment. Just the direct experiencing of chewing and tasting. To the degree that it's possible, even underneath any thoughts that might be going on about this experience, the direct sensory experience of the teeth coming down on this object and the taste in the mouth. And as you continue to do this, make sure that you don't swallow it yet. But noticing the changes in texture and in taste that go on with continued chewing. And before we do swallow it, seeing if you can be in touch with the first impulse that arises to actually swallow this stuff. And be aware of the intention to swallow and how that whole thing gets arranged. How whatever's left gets positioned for swallowing. Then being in touch with the swallowing. And in the aftermath of the swallowing, resting in awareness. Of how it feels in this moment. As you sit here. And if you like, even in your mind's eye, or sensing in any way that you can, following what you've swallowed down into the belly, where it will come to rest in the stomach. And allowing your awareness to expand to include a sense of the body as a whole sitting here, having just eaten one raisin with this kind of present moment, open-hearted, spacious attention. And just resting here in this being, in this awareness, feeling how things are right now, in this moment, in the aftermath of all that's come before. Whether your eyes are open, whether your eyes are closed, seeing if you can feel how it is in the body, how it is in the mouth, how it is in the heart, and how it is in the mind. And just resting here. You could say outside of time, in the present moment, without having to have anything have to happen next. Of course, if you want to eat another raisin, mindfully, on your own at some point, certainly feeling free to do that. But ultimately, the challenge here, the practice here, is to simply be with each moment as it is. For the seeing, for the smelling, for the moving, for the receiving of the raisin, for the chewing and tasting, the swallowing, and the aftermath. And to be the knowing. Be that which knows the experience in its unfolding, as it's unfolding. And resting here, moment by moment by moment, until you hear the sound of the bells, which will mark the end of this first guided introductory mindfulness meditation. Let's take the same quality of attention that we just brought to eating the raisin, the same moment-to-moment, non-judging, non-cerebral, direct tasting of our experience. Whatever it is, whether it was through the touching or the seeing or the hearing or the smelling or the actual tasting and then the feeling of the swallowing and what came in the aftermath. And let's bring this same quality of mindfulness now to the feeling of the breath moving in and out of the body. I'm making the wild assumption that if you're listening to this program, that you actually are breathing. And so it can become a central object of our attention. And we can let everything else move into the wings, so to speak, and feature the breath center stage in the field of awareness. We don't have to all of a sudden get involved in moving the air, in pushing it in or out, but to just let the body breathe itself, and we hold it in awareness, feeling the sensations in the body associated with this gentle flowing of the breath in and the breath out. Almost as if you could taste the breath. Touch the breath. Not with your fingers, but with that whole felt sense. That capacity for knowing what is actually transpiring in the body. And then riding the waves of our own breathing, moment by moment by moment as we sit here or lie here. And you can do this either sitting or lying. If you're sitting, you might want to sit in a posture that embodies dignity, whatever that means to you. And if you're lying down, equally so, that embodies wakefulness. Because it's an occupational hazard of lying down meditations, of course, to fall asleep, but the invitation is to fall awake rather than to fall asleep. And you can set that as an intention for yourself if you're lying down. And to feel the breath, to be aware of the full duration of the breath coming into the body, the full duration of the breath leaving the body, moment by moment by moment. Noticing where you're drawn to feel the breath, where it's most vivid in the body. And letting your attention settle wherever that is. Perhaps it's at the nostrils, or perhaps it's in the belly, where we can feel the abdominal wall expanding out very gently and naturally on the in-breaths and receding a little bit back towards the spine on the out-breaths. Or wherever else in the body you are feeling the breath most vividly, and simply, as I said, riding on the waves, the felt waves of your own breathing, moment by moment by moment, as if your life depended on it, which of course it does. And just once again, remembering that it's not the breath that's important so much as the awareness that's important. Of course, the breath is important, but the awareness is what we're cultivating here. You've been breathing for a long time. It's been going very nicely, I'm sure. But now we're moving into an entirely different relationship with the breath. Cultivating intimacy with the feeling of the breath moving in and out. Not thoughts about the breath or how well you're doing with this, but just over and over again, resting in the awareness of breathing itself. The in-breath, the out-breath, this moment, this breath, this moment, this breath. Same vivid, discerning, open, clear quality of attention brought to the breath that you brought to eating the raisin. Different object, same awareness. Allowing yourself to settle into those characteristics of awareness that feel like stillness, that feel like silence. And seeing if it's not actually possible to be comfortable in stillness and silence. Just riding on the waves of the breath, at the belly, at the nostrils, wherever. Moment by moment, by moment by moment. As we sit here, or as we lie here, fully awake. Fully in touch. Now, it won't take long resting in this kind of silence and stillness to discover that the mind kind of has a life of its own. And just because you have a strong motivation to, practice mindfulness at this moment or to follow along with my voice doesn't mean that you're actually going to keep your attention on the breath. This is a kind of huge discovery that beginners are sometimes shocked by. My God, it's not so easy to keep the mind on the breath. Just know that it's not just beginners that are shocked by this. This is part of the nature of mind, that it has a life of its own, and that it is just filled with all sorts of thoughts and feelings and ideas and preoccupations with the future and the past, and now with meditation and maybe having all these thoughts about your breath all of a sudden. You never thought about your breath at all. Now maybe, am I doing it right? Or am I breathing deeply enough? Or judging like, God, this is boring. When are we going to get to the good stuff? Or whatever it is, just noticing how easy it is for the mind to intrude into the space of awareness and carry your attention away so that the breath actually disappears from awareness. We've lost touch. And here there's one basic instruction that's really important. And that is when you notice that your mind is not on your breath anymore, in the body, well, you're already back because some part of your awareness has actually let it register that your mind wandered away. So noticing what's on your mind in that moment and just let it be. And then gently and lovingly and caringly and firmly reestablishing your primary focus once again on the breath in the belly or at the nostrils or wherever. You don't have to give yourself a hard time or turn yourself into a failure. This is just what the mind does, is it wanders here, it wanders there. It's got ideas and opinions, as we've seen, about just about everything. And we want to, of course, be good at this if we're doing it. So just keep in mind, you're breathing already perfectly. The question is, can you be in awareness? Can you be the knowing of breathing? And when the mind goes off someplace else, is distracted or preoccupied, just noting what's on your mind, bring it back. Gently, lovingly. And if mind wanders 1,000 times, just bring it back 1,000 times after you've noted what's on your mind. It's actually a huge and radical act of love and loving kindness to spend some time in this way, in the domain of being, and learning, really, from moment to moment, how it is in the body and what's on your mind. And then staying with the awareness. Or, as we've said, the awareness sing of breathing, featured center stage in the field of awareness, and everything else in the wings when it intrudes or carries us off. Mind goes off, you bring it back. Mind goes off, bring it back. Mind goes off, bring it back. Even if you don't want to bring it back, you're enjoying where the mind is. Bringing it back, that's part of the discipline of it. Just this moment, just this breath. Just this moment, just this breath. And the knowing of the breath. Now, as we sit here or lie here, resting in awareness featuring the breath flowing in and out of the body, we can experiment with actually expanding the field of awareness around the breath until it includes a sense of the body as a whole, sitting here or lying here, breathing, because of course we're still breathing. So noticing if your awareness is flexible enough so that it can just hold this larger focus of attention, so to speak. Breath is still going just the way the breath has been going. The mind may be wandering like crazy, just the way the mind has been wandering. We keep bringing it back over and over and over again without judging ourselves harshly or criticizing ourselves, but with awareness of what the mind is up to and where it is going. But now we're holding the whole body in awareness, and it's actually breathing. So feeling the full universe of sensations associated with the body lying here or sitting here, being itself. Bathed by the air, drawing the air in, letting it come out, which is what we call breathing. But actually seeing if you can be in touch with, say, the envelope of your skin, which is also caressed by the air and in its own way also breathing. And just a sense, however it is, of your body, just as it is, whatever sensations are here, whether it's a sense of heaviness or a sense of lightness, a sense of tingling or throbbing or whatever is going on in the body. And of course, there are many, many different sensations in the body, and they come and go and flux and change. And just, again, remembering that what we're cultivating here is an awareness that can simply hold the whole of it. In this case, the body as a whole, sitting or lying down and breathing, moment by moment by moment. And as when we were just focusing on the breath, when the mind takes off and goes here and goes there, and we forget about the body and we lose track of being here and we're off someplace else in the past or in the future, or having some argument or other, or struggle or other with somebody else or with ourselves, just noticing, where's the body in this moment? Where's the breath in this moment? Where's my mind in this moment? And just gently escorting it back to the belly, to the breath, to the skin, to the entirety of the body sitting or lying here, complete as it is in its wholeness, however it is. Whether the sensations in various parts of the body are pleasant or unpleasant, comfortable or uncomfortable, or so neutral you'd hardly notice. Seeing if you can hold it all in awareness, moment by moment by moment, without trying to make anything go away. We're not trying to relax. We're not trying to get anywhere. We're not trying to obliterate thought. We're simply resting in awareness with things exactly as they are and featuring the body as a whole. Breathing. Moment by moment by moment by moment by moment. Fully awake. allowing the attention to be affectionate, kindly towards oneself, compassionate and accepting towards oneself. As best you can, without forcing, without pushing, without striving, just being here, in the body, feeling the body as a whole, sitting or lying and breathing. As best you can, noticing that each in-breath is a new beginning. Each out-breath a complete letting go. So that we stay fresh, fully awake to the timeless present. That is what we mean when we say now. When we inhabit the now. A veritable stepping out of clock time into your life, into this moment, into things exactly as they already are, into clarity and acceptance and awareness. And just keeping in mind that if the mind wanders, it's just what the mind does, just the same way oceans wave. There's nothing wrong with your mind for wandering. You're not a bad meditator because your mind is wandering. You're not trying to suppress the wandering of the mind. You're just holding it in awareness, noticing what's on your mind when it goes off, and then gently, lovingly bringing it back. Over and over and over and over and over again. As if it mattered, as if your life depended on it. And as we've said, it does. It does. It does. let's shift the focus of our attention for a time away from the breath and a sense of the body as a whole. Of course, we're still going to be breathing and we're still going to have a body, so it's not that we're abandoning the breath or the body. But let's feature center stage in the field of awareness sound. This whole domain, this whole sensory domain, where the world, courtesy of the air, by the way, is making its way to our ears. And just hearing what's here to be heard. Not going out and actually seeking for sound, listening really hard, striving to hear, but simply letting sounds arrive at your door, letting them come to you, and resting in an awareness of hearing sounds and the spaces between them, and the silence inside, you might say, and underneath all sound, as we sit here, as we lie here, still breathing, still in our bodies, so to speak, but now we're featuring the domain of hearing and letting everything else be in the wings, and bringing the same quality of attention moment by moment by moment to the hearing that we brought to the whole eating of the raisin, and then to the breath and the body. Moment by moment by moment, giving ourselves over, you could say, to the soundscape. Sounds near, sounds far, and being the hearing, being this faculty of knowing that's before thinking. It doesn't have to go out and label everything that you're hearing and think about it, but just the direct perceiving of sound and the spaces between them, inside them, underneath them, as we sit here, as we lie here. Bathing in the soundscape such as it is. Noticing the mind may prefer some sounds to others, may come up with thinking that if only you had better sounds or put on some music, you'd be having a better meditation. As best you can, letting go of all of that. It's just thinking and being with what you're already hearing. However it is, good, bad, or ugly, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, doesn't matter at all. It's the awarenessing that's important, not the particulars of the objects of attention. And perhaps even marveling at this amazing sense that we have that allows us to hear and therefore know anything at all in the domain of sound and the spaces between them. You already know how to hear, just hearing. And being the knowing. Of course, if the mind wanders, as it will, just continually noticing what's on your mind when it's not attending to hearing and coming back to featuring the hearing center stage over and over again. Hearing not just with the ears maybe, but with the whole of your body, with your bones, with your skin. Now, this could be a whole meditation in its own right that could go on for as long as you like, as with every other meditation we're visiting. But in the context of this program, right now we'll actually, if you care to, redirect the attention once again, this time to the domain of thinking, perhaps to all of those things that you thought were intrusions in all the other attempts to stay present with an object like the breath or a sense of the body as a whole or sounds. So now let's actually attend to the stream of our thinking and treat it in the same way that we're treating sound, like little secretions in the mind that come and go, and seeing if we can just detect them as thoughts known, held, seen, felt in awareness as thoughts. It could be thoughts about anything, thoughts about the past, thoughts about the future, thoughts about why you're not finding many thoughts as you're looking for thoughts. But the point is not to look for thoughts, to just be aware of them if and when they come by. So the thought of not being able to find a thought is a thought. And you may notice that as you sit here or lie here, watching your thoughts, that they tend to have an emotional charge or valence associated with them. So some are very pleasant thoughts. Some may be very anxiety-producing thoughts, or depressing kinds of thoughts, or frightening kinds of thoughts. And here we're treating all thoughts as equal, and about as interesting, actually, as what you had for dinner 3 or 4 nights ago. So we're not particularly interested in the content, although awareness can know the content, but we're not being sucked into the content or the emotion, but to simply be aware of thoughts as events in the field of awareness, as if they were bubbles coming off the bottom of a pot of boiling water, or bubbles in a stream, or an image that Tibetans like to use, writing on water. They come, they go. If we don't feed them, if we don't pursue them, if we don't reject them. So resting here in awareness of thinking and of any emotions that come through, whether they're on the sad side or the scary side or the angry side or the happy side or the joyful side, just allowing awareness to hold it all. Thoughts and feelings, as if they were sounds, not taking it all so personally. Noticing how often they want to pull us into the past, or obsess about the future, planning, worrying, and just being the knowing, resting in awareness as the thoughts and emotions come and go like waves dancing on the sea, or like writing on water, or like soap bubbles that when we touch them with awareness, no matter what their charge, no matter how much they've plagued us in the past, tend to go poof, just like soap. Poof. Being the knowing, not caught in thought. And again, of course, if you do get caught, which you will, as soon as you notice that you are downstream in the thought stream, way, way far away from attending to your thinking, you're already back. Not criticizing yourself, not castigating yourself, simply noting how things are now and moving back into the frame of awarenessing what's unfolding in the mind, in the heart, in this moment. The awareness being already free. Not plagued by the thoughts, not tormented by thoughts, not imprisoned by them. Just knowing them and befriending them and settling into the stillness and the spaciousness and the silence that awareness already is. This is a hard practice. This is not necessarily what you'd call a beginner's practice, although maybe beginners are best at it. But it's not easy to not be sucked into the thought stream or to be carried away by emotions, especially afflictive emotions. But it isn't hard either once you understand that the awareness is really critical. So if you get carried downstream, so what? No problem. Not taking it personally, just over and over and over again, resting in the awareness. And your thinking and your feelings and everything that appears will show you and teach you everything that you need to know. And if you do feel like you're overwhelmed or gotten lost in thought or in emotions that you really don't want to deal with at this moment, well, you can always go back to the breath. You can always go back to the breath, to a sense of the body as a whole, sitting here or lying here. And do that for 30 or 40 years. They're not like one practice superior to another. They're all different doors into the same room. And so whatever door feels most congenial to you at the moment, it's fine. It's the awarenessing that's important, not the objects that you're paying attention to or that are plaguing you. If you don't take them personally, they won't take you so personally. And there's freedom right inside this moment. This sitting here, this being human, this knowing that's bigger than thinking. This befriending of the mind and the heart as they are. This befriending of silence and stillness that are so native to our experience as human beings and also so foreign because we ignore them so much. Moment by moment, knowing what's on your mind. Moment by moment, knowing, feeling what is in your heart. Right here, right now. As if your life depended on it. Well, we've reached a point in our journey together where we've cultivated this quality we've been calling mindfulness or open-hearted, spacious awareness, and featuring a number of different objects that are part of our life experience. And we've been choosing what to pay attention to. Whether it's the breath sensations or the sense of the body as a whole, sensations within the body, or sounds, or thoughts, or feelings, all of the entire repertoire of being human. And there's one more step that we might take, which is to inhabit the same awareness, but now without choosing any objects to focus on, what we call choiceless awareness, where there's no agenda at all in terms of what we pay attention to. Of course, there's no agenda even when we're paying attention to the objects. It's simply being the knowing through the various sense doors, of which there are more than 5, as we've seen. But we're not excluding anything from the domain of experience in this last meditation. We're just expanding the field of awareness once again around the breath, around the body as a whole, breathing into the domain of the soundscape, and around not only sounds, but thoughts, feelings, emotions, every aspect of being human. We're now embracing it all in awareness. So moment by moment, if you care to, just allowing the field of your awareness to be so open that it's like the sky. It's just boundless. It's so spacious that it's really not different from space itself. And this quality of awareness is actually native to the mind, that the mind's natural state, if you will, true nature is boundless and knowing, and also spacious in the sense that it can hold anything. It doesn't take up room by itself. So it can hold thoughts or feelings, sensations in the body, and these can be either painful or not painful. It can be anxiety producing or not. From the perspective of the awareness, it doesn't matter. It's like a mother holding a child. You know, no matter what the child has done, the mother still holds the child. Even if the child is hurting, the mother can hold the child in awareness. And in the holding, comfort. Be comforting. So, for now, just resting in this choiceless, vast field of awareness that lets everything come and go. Whatever arises in the present moment becomes the transient object of our knowing, of our attending, as best we can, not being carried away by anything, or if we are, just coming back into the spaciousness, moment by moment by moment, as we sit here or lie here, being the knowing, being the spaciousness, and not taking anything personally when it's truly not personal. Allowing the silence itself to be infinite, the stillness to be enduring. When thoughts come, we just, like a mirror with whatever's coming in front of it, just knowing whatever's coming. So if it's thoughts, then thoughts. If they're about the future, then we see that it's about the future. If they're about the past, we see that. If they're greedy, we see they're greedy. If they're angry, we see they're angry. If they're deluded, the awareness sees the delusion and just doesn't have to do anything, doesn't have to make anything happen, just sees. And in the seeing, again, it's as if, the touching of the thoughts and awareness to just, what the Tibetans call it is they self-liberate. They just don't go anywhere if we don't feed them. We just compassionately touch them in awareness. And the awareness touches them all by itself, so you don't need to do anything. There's no doing here. Just resting in choiceless awareness, moment by moment by moment. And reestablishing it if you get lost or carried away, which of course you're bound to do. In some traditions, this is called the method of no method. There's really no method here. There's nothing to do, no place to go, no instructions even to follow. It's not a technique. It's just being aware, being awake. In Japanese Zen, they call it shikantaza, just sitting, nothing more. No big deal. In Tibetan tradition, they speak of similar practices as the great natural perfection, Dzogchen. In Chinese Zen, they speak of it as silent illumination. it's available at all moments and also takes a lifetime of training. And both of those statements are always and equally the case. So it's not an advanced practice, it's just practice. If it's congenial, just being here. Being who you already are. Outside of time and underneath thought. Like an empty mirror, reflecting, as we said, whatever comes. And not clinging to it so that when it comes, it comes. When it goes, it goes. And we stay in the receptive, empty, spacious, knowing quality of awareness. That gives us this whole other dimensionality of being in which to live, in which to be touched by the world and to touch the world and others in their joy and in their pain. In which to come to our senses, all of them, in which to wake up to the actuality of who we are. And as the Navajo like to say, to walk in beauty. They say, as a blessing, may you walk in beauty. I like to say, may you recognize that you already do. That you already are.